Hello, this is Father Hightower, and welcome to VOXSFX, the voice of St. Francis Xavier Parish in Missoula, Montana. We are so pleased that you have joined us. Your participation enriches our entire community. We hope that our show serves as a point of light, helping to deepen our understanding and experience of the Catholic faith in history. So join us as we seek through prayer, study, interviews, and discussion the roots of the practice of our faith. God bless.
Austin Peppenger has a remarkable story of trial and redemption. He's a longtime friend of the show. He's not Catholic yet, but he has found a lot of fruits of the Spirit by listening to the show that you're listening to right now. We have him on the show because I thought it would be excellent to have a perspective of somebody who admires a lot of things about the Catholic Church, but is not yet Catholic themselves. He comes from a very restrictive upbringing where misconceptions were the norm and where hatred took the place of love. The enemy, as it was known to him, was all sorts of people, those who are marginalized, and us Catholics. When he began listening to this show, and he began attending Mass, so many of his misconceptions were banished. As all of us who are Catholic are aware, there are a lot of things that are said about us that are just frankly untrue, but people don't bother to learn what's actually going on. Austin is not one of those people. When his beliefs were challenged, when fact did not match up with what his perspective was, he changed it. He modified it. His is a story of darkness and of light, a story of despair and hope, and a story of a journey towards a loving God who only wants to cradle him as he cradles all of us. So please, sit back and enjoy as we hear the story and the perspective of Austin Peppenger. With us in the studio today is Austin Peppenger. Austin, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Okay, Andrew, thank you very much for having me. It's a wonderful experience to be here today and a wonderful experience to talk here with you.
So you have come down for the veneration of Padre Pio, right?
I have.
It was your first time in a veneration. What did you think?
You know what? It was exactly what I expected and nothing like I expected at the same time. I've never actually been in the presence of relics like this. I've never been to a veneration. I'm largely very toes in the water with Catholicism. So being invited down here to come and see this has been just a very different experience. And it's a little bit of the same of what I expected from previous experiences in Catholic Church with Catholicism, of you're observing the traditions, showing reverence. As far as it goes, the veneration was top-notch. It was very nice. There was a nice little spot that you were explained this for. There was a good card that explains, okay, this is Padre Pio. This is the things that are associated with Padre Pio, some of the miracles, what the relics are, what they mean, a brief explanation of the life. Going into this with a little bit more knowledge because of VOXSFX, previous podcast on Padre Pio, gave me a little bit better understanding, which I really appreciated. Going into something that you have an elementary understanding before you just kind of like jump in and go, I have no idea what I'm doing.
And I am absolutely thrilled, by the way, that we do have a fan, a listener of VOXSFX on the show, because you're kind of showing exactly what we're working towards, which is to introduce people to the Catholic faith and garner that interest.
Well, it's been an absolutely eye-opening experience because growing up the way I did, I grew up evangelical, and kind of being told the entire time that the Catholics do a lot of these behaviors that we say are like abominable in the eyes of God. They say the Catholics worship these idols and they go through these motions of their prayer that's not really real. It's not really prayer. It doesn't really count because you're just saying the words like a parrot. All of this stuff that I've been told, I'm coming to find that I was told out of a lens of the furthest thing from love. It's something between hatred and indifference. So coming in here and finding out for myself and learning for myself rather than what is told to me through the lens of propaganda. What the Catholic Church is, what they do, and who the people are has been incredibly eye-opening, and VOXSFX is a good starting point for that. You get to come in here with a little bit of an elementary understanding of what the church is, the history of the church, and how things are performed. So it's just been eye-opening for me as a whole.
Well, and this is your first time here at St. Francis Xavier, and you were remarking earlier about the beauty that we have inside of our church. That's not something that's typically overly common in a Protestant setting.
No, gosh, no. We have what would be comparatively considered Spartan. You have basically what was like a baptismal font, which serves as where you would put the Eucharist, or as we call it, communion, or the Lord's Supper. There's a lot of words for it. All of them kind of mean the same thing in our opinion. We have that in there. We have all our chairs in there and a pulpit. And everything else is largely unadorned. It's, kind of white plaster walls built for harmonics when it is. And then a lot of the times in Protestant churches too, you'll run into that it's just a home church, which is a little bit more welcoming than you would think.
I do love our beauty, though. Our statuary, our frescoes, our stained glass. This is really a gorgeous church here.
Oh, I would absolutely agree with you. Going in here, and then that is the first thing I remarked on. I went in there and was darn near awestruck by the beauty of it. So this is hundreds of years of tradition, if not thousands of years of tradition, being packed into this in such a way that it elevates your eyes. It focuses you upwards to look towards the heavens, to look towards God in this, to appreciate the beauty and what the artist brings to the table. So someone came through here and made each and every one of these individual things, each and every one of these frescoes and the stonework and the masonwork and everything between. And you see that the artist has done a job of making sure that they glorify God through their art, which being taught this entire time is just, no, it's just idol worship. You're praying to this, you're praying to that, you're not praying to God. And I'm sitting here going, that's not the case at all. You're coming in here and you're appreciating the beauty around you that people have worked hard, like backbreaking work to do this. There's stuff painted on the ceilings. I can't imagine getting up there on a scaffold on my back and trying to paint all this stuff. It'd be nightmarish. But someone went up there and did it. Someone went up there and put in hours upon hours of work to make sure that this glorified God. And that's just the painting alone. Just the paintings alone. We could talk about the mason work. We could talk about all of the acoustics of the building, because I noticed the acoustics of the building. This is phenomenal. This is tailor-made so that a voice can be heard and resonate throughout the building. So all this stuff that I was told is just, the Catholics just showing off their wealth or something like that. It's not the case at all. And you're taught that as an evangelical the entire time, is that, especially with the Catholic faith, that all of this is done for pomp and circumstance to make all this ritual as bright and flashy as possible. And I come in here, I'm saying, wait, that's not the case. It's never been the case. Why was I told the case? Why did I just blindly believe it was the case? Why did I fall into just zealotry of my own of just being this blind fanatic towards this? Well, because I was raised like that.
Sure.
And from an early age, this is what I was taught and this is what I believed.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, though, because as you mentioned, you came from an evangelical tradition when you were younger. How did that affect you?
Well, as a whole, what you were taught very early on in there is that you put on your church face. So I can think of about 2 or 3 times in my life driving to church where my family was not bickering at each other the entire time. We were having active, almost yell arguments the entire time. And as soon as we got out of the car, the moment the car stopped and the engine was off, you put on your church face. What I refer to in my life as a porcelain mask that you put on. And then you kind of go in there and say, everything's hunky-dory. We love each other so much, and we love you, and you love us, and we love each other during this 1 hour of a week. And the moment we get back in that car, the bickering starts again. So just that alone is a little bit detrimental on the forming years of my life, I would say. That being said, I'm sure this is true for a lot of different faiths, a lot of different sects of Christianity. This is something that I'm assuming it's not normal, but it's common. It's a situation that you have to deal with in those, and maybe people had it better than that, but maybe they didn't too. because a lot of the time you go in there into this church and you spend your hour worshiping. And it was wonderful. The worship service was absolutely phenomenal. And you're taught all these things about you need to go out there and show love. We sing in here. We gather together and we have our potlucks and we get engaged in fellowship. We love each other. We bring more people in. And then, even the people in the back are sitting in the back row, and make sure you greet them and make sure they know they're welcome, but don't mind the dirty stares because you're wearing a t-shirt to church and stuff like that. And there's a lot that gets into it. And it kind of teaches you to be subtly hateful because you're taught to do all this stuff within the church, but then you immediately go out within 5 minutes, and you're back to your earthly self. You've cast aside this entire hour that you've spent engaging in fellowship, worshiping, taking this divinity and embracing it. And then you immediately go out and you call your neighbor a slur. It's a weird concept to think about.
That's a challenge for a lot of people of faith. Because even for us Catholics, when we take the Eucharist and we take the body and the blood into ourselves, as we believe, through transubstantiation, there's still that challenge of when you hit the door on the way out, of making sure that that transformation transforms you at the same time.
It's true. It's the difference between, observing a tradition and making it real for yourself, engaging in what is, in this sense, a miracle, the transubstantiation. I didn't understand the difference between transubstantiation and consubstantiation until listening to the podcast. That's probably, I think, our first interaction is that you had said to me, we were at a different event altogether, completely unrelated, and said, you need to watch this podcast on the difference between transubstantiation and consubstantiation. I said, well, it's the joke that we had in the church, too, of the Catholics are technically cannibals, if this is right. And I'm sitting there going, oh, man. And of course, I'm chanting that with everyone else. I've got my little picket line, and I'm chanting that, too. And I sit there back here and look, and I'm like, oh, man, well, that wasn't very nice, and it wasn't very true either. I just held on to that hate because I was told that everyone who's different than me is going to hell. We have a joke in there about that, of, a man gets to heaven. And he sees that, he's being toured around. He sees that he's got his golden buildings and his pearly streets and stuff like that. And he sees that there's a lot of people around. He's like, oh, this is pretty cool. But he notices there's a large wall. And he says, well, what's over that large wall? And then the angel goes to him and says, okay, you got to be really quiet when you look. And he looks over the other side and it's completely the same. There's people over there too. He says, well, why is there a wall here? He says, well, don't tell anyone. But the evangelicals are over there, and they think they're the only ones here. So it's that concept of like, we run into it so much of just like kind of screaming that I'm the only one right, until you realize that you've narrowed down your group of people who are right until it's only you. That you yourself are the only one right, not even your family's right, not even your body of believers is right, and certainly anyone outside of that church is not right. It's a weird concept to get into on that. And then you blindly believe it because you've been taught this so long. From your forming years, you just blindly believe this again and again and again. You go out and you enact on this. That because I am right, it means you are wrong. Again and again. And since you're wrong, I can do whatever I darn well please because you're in the wrong. I can stand on this moral high ground in my ivory tower and cast stones upon you. And I did my fair share of stone throwing.
One of the things that I really like about the church, and particularly Vatican II, that basically changed the way that the church thinks about itself. Instead of saying, we are right, we say, we believe we are right. We believe that what we practice is the best way to serve God and to get to heaven. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't honor and love people from other traditions. It's not about superiority. It's about saying, yeah, we think we're right. Obviously, we think that because this is the way we worship and believe, but that doesn't take away from the human dignity of the other person.
Yeah, and I've been reading into that too. This is at Vatican II in the portion of Dignitatis Humanae, correct? I probably butchered that entirely on the pronunciation, but what it gets into is that an important thing is understanding that, yes, we as believers believe that we are correct. It's the faith aspect of it. You can't definitively prove that you're correct in the same way I cannot definitively prove that God exists. It's a faith. It's something that you choose to believe in. The important thing is understanding that just because I believe I'm right does not mean that anyone else is wrong. We believe we found a correct path. It doesn't mean there's no more correct paths. We just said, hey, there's a good one right here. We talk about that even just among Christianity of the way is narrow and few find it. There's a broad path. So when you find that path, the thing that's really tricky is that you're taught within this stuff of like, oh, you should bring more people to it, but kind of do it through fear and hate mongering. Make sure they know they're going to hell unless they take this path. And what I'm seeing out of the Catholic Church as a whole is that the outreach has been a night and day difference from what I was taught would be done. I expect to come in here and then someone's actually singing like Hellfire from Notre Dame. I'm taught to believe that I'm going to come in here and there's going to be a man on the pulpit berating me that I'm a sinner and going to hell. And I'm sitting there not seeing that. There's nothing of that here. I walk in and no one bats an eye at me. I walk in, I observe the traditions. When in Rome, do as the Roman Catholics do. So you kind of observe it until you understand it. It's out of respect for it. So I'm sitting there kind of piecing it together as best I can and realizing that no one hates me here. And people actually do want to see more people come in and not just at face value. A lot of the times what I'm seeing from people that I know who are Catholic and are good practicing Catholics, because in every faith, we're going to have the people who really make it real for themselves and the people who kind of just observe it and then, hit my punch card for salvation, as it were.
Well, the difference between being culturally Catholic, being raised in the church and having that be something that's just normal for you, and being religiously Catholic, which is really getting into it, practicing the contemplative prayer, trying to make your life more sanctified, and really focusing on that. Again, there's that within a lot of religions in terms of the people who take it seriously and the people who don't. But one of the things that I like about the church, and it seems that you do too, is that people are at least genuine in their approach.
That's what I keep seeing again and again is people are very genuine. There's not this level of subterfuge that I've experienced or was expected to experience here. Because I came in here vaguely thinking that it was going to be some sort of weird secret society on the side. I'm like hearing about the Knights of Columbus. What's that about? It's like Freemasons or something like that, just to realize that no, it's a community outreach program in the same way that the Freemasons are a community outreach program. And then everything's kind of been sensationalized to the point that we're just making secrets to have secrets. But I come in here and everyone's been genuine. You as an evangelical, you learn to kind of read faces to see who's kind of has the forked tongue and who doesn't. If you're being lied to, and the concept of, oh, bless your heart.
Oh, bless your little heart.
Oh, bless your little heart. My goodness, I can feel my toes curl when I hear that. Of just like platitude said to you in a nice voice that means something else, this double speak that you're taught. And I come in here and I'm met with honesty. I'm met with people who are showing integrity and who leave the building and continue to show integrity in their day-to-day lives, which is largely a foreign concept, to me at least.
So it's been kind of refreshing for you.
Oh, it's been incredibly refreshing. This is a breath of fresh air or a cool drink of water coming from where I came from. And I've been largely kind of church shopping around, as it were, going to various places within my community, seeing if any of them fit. And I've gone to a couple. I was so surprised to go to a Baptist church to find out that it has turned into a mega church. So they've got their projector and their band and like kind of everything is handled for you. You have this big long sermon. Like everyone's kind of waving around their arms and stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong with that if it works for you, but it certainly doesn't work for me. I'm used to going into a setting where there's no projector. You're lucky if you have a microphone. The song leading is done by someone who is sitting there with a pitch pipe and making sure you're on key, stuff like that. And then I come into here and I'm like, well, wait a second. This is just televangelism that I'm sitting through. So I go into there and I see that, and I go into another one and I see more of that. I'm kind of just shopping around and I say, well, why don't I check out the Catholic Church? So of course I reach out to you and I'm like, okay, Cantor Nicholas, what am I expected to do here and stuff like that? I have an elementary understanding. I can kind of mimic my way into like passing as Catholic for the Mass, as it were. I know there's certain things I absolutely should not do, and certain things like the Eucharist that as an unconfirmed Catholic I should not participate in. I did a little bit of research. I have some understanding in Catholicism from friends in the past who have kind of walked me through it but it's largely holding me by the hand the entire time. So when I come in here and things are very pleasant, you kind of just go through the process. Everyone's actually very nice, and they continue to be nice even when you're not paying attention to them, which is a very important distinction. So I'm sitting here going, well, okay, maybe I just take a little bite of Catholicism and see what happens on there. And I'm sitting here now thinking, I'm like, well, you don't have as close a mind as you used to. Because, of course, this entire time I'm sitting here believing you're the only one right. Everyone else is wrong. How could you possibly be wrong until your world kind of shatters? And I had my shattering moment when I was like 19.
Let's talk about that a little bit. What broke your faith beforehand when you were going to the more evangelical side?
Well, what broke my faith primarily was after I graduated from high school, so I'm about 19 years old, I got in with a bad crowd and I got heavily, heavily into drug addiction. My drug addiction was prolific and terrible, and when I ran out of my own resources, I decided to engage in more unsavory activities to get more resources, to get more drugs. And in that process, I had alienated myself from darn near everyone in my life, as you're wont to do in those situations. You don't care about who you hurt. You're not even yourself anymore. You've become the drug that you take. They have an adage about that out of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, of you can always turn your back on a friend, but don't you ever turn your back on a drug. I've run into that situation more times than I care to count, but in this time, it was a 2-year period where I was engaging in the most unsavory behaviors I could to get my fix. In that time, I had alienated myself from God. It's not that I was cast out, but I had alienated myself and fell into this entire rampant addiction for about a 2-year period. When coming back, there wasn't really the prodigal son response. It's like no one even admitted that it happened. No one wanted to address it. No one wanted to talk about it at the same time. And watching what had happened in my absence and hearing what had happened in my absence to members of the church who were just trying to live their lives, exist, there were certain behaviors that I found monstrous from the church. There was a massive falling out in the church that I attended, largely led by the current preacher there and a few other families there. And there was a huge schism in the church over a very specific incident and how they handled a member of the church who had been displaced, who was homeless and was staying in the church. They had handled it as if he were a criminal this entire time. It was an absolutely miserable experience. So I come back and I see this. I'm like, I don't want to be part of this. There's no part of me. And I walked out. Even after that, even after the drug addiction, what I continued on is just living an insanely sinful life. Like, at that time, I knew that I was Christian. But did I honor God in any way, shape, or form? No. I think the only thing I prayed for was, please don't let me die from this. I think that's my entire prayer structure was, please don't let me die from this. Or the moment of, you're in your drug addiction and you're saying, I'm so sorry, God, I'll never do it again. And please get me through this. And I'll never touch this stuff again and blah, blah, blah. You're making the addict's prayer again and again. And lo and behold, I made it through it. And so even in the addict's prayer, I made it through it. God said, I'm not done with you yet. You're not allowed to die. You have a purpose to fulfill on this earth. Keep on living. Get up and walk with me. That was probably my biggest point in my life where the presence of God felt faintest. It's not that he was gone, but it's that I had blocked him out as far as I could so that I could not feel what I perceived was an accusatory gaze upon me. I didn't want to feel the eyes of God upon me, looking at me and just with my own voice yelling, sinner, sinner, sinner. And understanding that in that time, thinking that God's going to hate you, God's going to hate you, God's going to hate you because you did this, this, and this. Just to realize the entire time that the only one who hated me was me. God never gave up on me. God never God never stopped walking with me or picking me back up when I fell. He said, get up, Austin, let's keep going. Now, let's go back about a year or two ago. Now I'm finally ready to start getting back into this faith. I'm saying, okay, I can start trying to actually at least pantomime being a Christian again. And one of the first things I do from that is not attend at all and figure that I know what I can do. I've been taught what I can do, and I can just handle this on my own. No, you can't. No, you can't. We were never meant to fight on our own. We were never meant to exist as solitary creatures like that. And in that sense, what you're going to do is incentivize in your own mind that you can survive on your own and you are right. And then I'm incentivizing again that I'm the only one who's right. So what happens is, after a while, I've developed such a sense of guilt that I cannot get past. Because not only have I failed God, I've failed myself, I've thrown my entire life away. I had a bright and promising future, and I completely cast it aside to pursue this drug and then amoral behaviors, just absolutely terrible things. So I figure I'm going to go volunteer and work off what I perceive as my sin debt, air quotations, this sin debt that I've established on myself. And I was like, well, where can I do the most good? Where is no Christian going to do? And I go and volunteer for a place called Glacier Queer Alliance, which is a queer advocacy group and outreach group in Kalispell. I just go there, and all I want to do is just put skills that I've learned to the test and just help them out with that. Heavy lifting. Look how many chairs I can carry. I'm an evangelical youth. I got 15 on each arm. Look at me go. Type of situation. And within 2 meetings of there, I go to their planning meetings. I work on some volunteer and stuff. And within 2 planning meetings, people start talking about their experiences and what the church did to them. And I start listening really hard. And I start making correlations in my head. I start understanding a little bit more that you weren't right the entire time. You were so wrong. I sat there and was told my entire life that these people are hiding behind their flag, hurling insults at you. And I came to realize, no, that flag is a shield protecting them from the rocks that I'm throwing from my ivory tower. Me, myself, Austin Peppenger, and everyone that I sat there with and laughed with and ate with and cohorted with and conspired with against them. Because I've done some horrible things in my life and none of them deserve that. So I left that meeting. I said I had to go do something. And I went out of that meeting and I ugly cried in my car. I have never felt such shame in my life, even through the horrible things that I have done in the past. I have never felt such shame in my life as that moment right there. You know, that kind of thing of like, why am I here? And it's like, to experience this. You need to experience this and understand where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing. And in that moment, I understood, you need to be here and you need to help this group. These are the people that you demonized, that you were told your entire life are your enemy and are going to hurt you, are going to hurt your family, and hurt your children. And it was never true. In the same way, with the Catholic Church, it was never true. I was just taught my entire life, everyone different than you is evil. So you make them like you so they're not evil anymore. And it's the entire wrong way of going about it. So now we're working on what we can do. We're looking for this concept, this idea of this fellowship that I can have again. And I'm very hesitant about it. But reaching out to you, Cantor, and finding out through a separate entity altogether that, well, you can listen to this podcast, you can understand a little bit more, you can learn a little bit more, and you can do it from the comfort of your own home. You can just sit there in your own quiet, you can understand it, and it feels a lot like offering a bowl of food to like a stray dog. It's like, okay, you can enjoy this on your own time. Just if you want more, if you want to learn more, just come ask. So I came in and asked, and the more I learned, the more I realized it's not as terrible as I thought. And it's not even bad in any way, shape, or form. So now it's beyond dipping your toes in. Now you're dipping your foot in. And we're still very hesitant about it. I'm terribly hesitant about it because, you kind of expect to get into the same situation again and again. You grow up with this experience and the forked tongues and the church faces, and the absence of them is actually jarring. You go in there expecting, dressed for war, as it were. You pray for the full armor of God, and you're going to come in here, and you're not going to be swayed by this stuff. And you come in there, and it's just a bunch of nice people going, "Hey, you okay?" You're like, Yeah. Like, why do you have a sword? I don't know. Why do you bring a sword here? Because I was scared that everyone else had swords, and I look around and there's not been any swords. There's not been any swords, and there's not been any forked tongues, and there's not been any church faces that I've seen so far. And honestly, it's just been a great experience.
I do want to talk a little bit about your experience with the Queer Alliance there up in Kalispell and kind of that transformation of thought where you went from seeing them as the enemy, seeing them as just dirty sinners that God doesn't like, and then seeing them as human beings, seeing them as people who were just as loved by God as you.
Let's clarify one thing. These are not just human beings. I went in there and found a loving and accepting community that I had thought was impossible. I go in there as an outsider. I go in there as a heterosexual male, completely not the demographic. Like, I go in there as freaking Saul of Tarsus to them. And there was a little bit of a vetting process to make sure I was safe because they need to protect their community, but they let me come in and they let me prove myself that I wasn't going to hurt them. So it's not just a state of being humans, it's a state of being beautiful humans, in a sense that I saw more love and acceptance in the Glacier Queer Alliance, in a gay advocacy group, than I ever experienced in my church in the entirety of my life. So going in there and expecting that I'm going to be kind of demonized to the sword, as it were, but kind of going in anyway, because like, well, I deserve it anyway, so why not? And then seeing that, no, they were never your enemies all along. They're hurting. No one will come minister to them. No one will come talk to them. And they are terrified of Christians. I sit there and I'm told the entire time that they're the boogeyman under my bed. And I come in there and I see that they are actively terrified of Christians. We are the boogeymen to them. And that was a big decision point for me, saying, conduct yourself better. Do not engage in your hateful behaviors. Show them that even with you as a poor example, not all Christians want to hurt you.
From what you were saying as well, you've kind of had the same experience with the Catholic Church in that kind of idea of people who are heavily demonized by the outside world, heavily misunderstood by the outside world, but genuine in their desire to serve God.
And that's the truth of it, is that you're genuine in your desire to serve God. And it's the beautiful thing of it. And I keep seeing that proven again and again. So it's the thing of, like, you can take things at face value, but I have a saying of trust but verify this. And what I keep running into in that is that people are being genuine. Again and again, I'm being shown that this lasts after you leave the building. And like you said, it's people who are heavily demonized. I come in here and I'm talking to you. I was like, is this true? Is this true? Is this true? And you say, no. And here's the fact check on it of why it's not true. You know, we were talking earlier about, is suicide a mortal sin? And you said, no. It's like, but I was taught my entire life that the Catholics believe that. And you said, no. You know, I was taught my entire life that, well, the Catholics pray to Mary. They don't pray to God. They love their idolatry and all this stuff. And you're like, no. And here's the reasoning behind it. And that's the important part, is that I was given the reasoning behind it. I was shown, you know, your fact check on it. It was like, no, this is how it's done. This is why it's not this. And no one gave that to me before. We just shouted slurs at you again and again and just demonized the Catholic Church again and again and made this entire stigma about it, about the stereotype. And it's the same as any sort of bigotry. It's exactly the same as any sort of bigotry. Of you're taking things that you've been told by people who are saying things through not the lens of love, but the lens of hate. And saying these people are evil because they do this, this, and this. You could apply that to any group. You could say race, sex, orientation, anything like that. And any of those things just boils back down to bigotry again and again. And of course, I'm sitting here going, well, why would the Catholics not be bigoted? The Crusades happened. You know, this happened. And I have like all these things of like, well, there's this misconduct and this misconduct and this misconduct. And then I go back and say, what about the misconducts that you perpetrated? What about the ones that you witnessed and then shut your mouth on? I'm sitting there going, well, maybe I'm not as innocent as I thought. And, maybe I shouldn't throw rocks anytime soon.
And it's been a while since the Crusades were over.
Oh, it's been a while. But we still have that mentality about us in just, the evangelical thing of like, well, they did this and this and this. And of course, the Pope is the voice of God. And they think that this guy is God and blah, 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 blah. And then I'm sitting there talking with you and you're like, that the Pope is, at the end of the day, a man. I'm like, what do you mean he's just a man? I thought you fully believed that he was like God on earth. And you're like, no. But I'm taught that in my entire life of like, this, this, and this. And all I've come in with is a bunch of misconceptions. And what I was met with was patience and understanding. I'm coming in here and I'm actively seeing the fruits of the Spirit that are yelled back at me of you show this, you show this, you show this, but said, through yells and spittle. And I come here and I see it calmly and considerately handled. Of, no, this is how it works. Here's the math. This is how it works. Here's the math. Sorry for that misconception. We don't hold it against you. Here's how it works. Here's the math. Again and again. And I'm sitting there going, well, I didn't think that. Like, wait a second. Why is no one yelling at me even though I was wrong? Even though I came in here with the understanding of like, oh yeah, the Catholics and their big traditions and all this stuff. And I come in here going, wait, I was wrong the entire time. Oh no, I was wrong the entire time. I bet everyone's going to hate me. And then no one hated me. And everyone's like, no, would you like to learn about us? You don't have to join. You can just learn. I'm sitting there going, yeah, I want to learn.
Well, it sounds like that's been a really fruitful process for you too, kind of learning a little bit more about the way that we view things and the way that we worship, and seeing how that can supplement your own spiritual practice and bring fruits to you as well.
It's an important distinction. Coming into this as someone from a different entire faith structure, because it now feels like a night and day difference. You come into us a different faith structure, and then people are willing to accommodate. And not only willing to accommodate, you don't throw aside what you knew that was good before. You implement it in, because what is good is continued to be good. You still have the things that you are taught out of love and of love that apply over here because it's the same thing. It's the same principles, but they're not being shouted. It's the same teachings, but they're not used to be weapons. It's the same Bible, but it's not being bashed over your head. So coming in here, understanding that, wait, I have an actual understanding at a baseline of Christianity and then moving over to Catholicism, just a separate sect of it, a lot of the stuff just translates over. It kind of meshes together really well because it's the same teaching.
Just kind of done in a different manner.
It's done in a different manner. It's a same, but different. But the different does matter. It's looking at things through the lens of love rather than the lens of hate.
If there's somebody listening to the show right now who finds themselves in a similar position to you, where they have some of these misunderstandings about the church or maybe some misgivings about approaching the church, what might you say to that person?
I have a business card for Cantor Nicholas, and he's actually super nice, and you can learn really well from him. That would be my primary one, but at the same time, I'm like, hey, you want to listen to this podcast where you can actually learn a few things that, they fact check themselves on? Because that's one of my favorite things is that you fact check yourself. All this stuff has been laid down for a very long time and is established. And you look back and you fact check it, and if you find out that you were wrong, you go back and say, oh no, we were wrong about this. Let us make it so that this is now, we correct our behaviors. And it's not that we're altering this so that we were right all along. We're acknowledging that a behavior was wrong. We fix the wrong behavior. We apologize, and we make sure that we do our best to not go down that path again. So for anyone who's in the same position as me, is like, you could just go down there and talk to someone. You can just do that. There's numbers in all these churches that you could just call and say, can I speak to someone about this, about what I'm feeling like? Or you can just listen to the podcast until you decide that you want to head on down yourself. But know this, from someone who's kind of a kicked puppy on it, it's not that bad. No one came here and whacked me.
Well, and that's That's not the point. I know a lot of people talk about Catholic guilt, but I personally see a lot more of that shame culture in other places. We acknowledge that we're sinners. We acknowledge that we're flawed human beings, but in doing so, we understand that we're just the same as everybody else. And that the idea of Catholic guilt is more of a, I know I'm sorry, how can I make it better?
And that's the important understanding, too, is how can I make it better? I fully expected to walk in and see someone actually like self-flagellating over that, saying, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, and I didn't run into that. What I'm running into is people who go in and confess their sins with a contrite heart, which is the important part. You go in there, you confess, and you say, I need to change this behavior. How do I change this behavior? It's not that you go in with your punch card and said, absolve me of my sins, Father, because I can do no wrong. But from my perspective, from the guilt on my side, it's dark and it's insidious and it's silent. You realize that you're yelling at yourself in your own head with your own voice again and again and again. So although I personally don't agree with the idea of the priest and the confession of sin, it's something that I have hesitations about. It's just a personal disagreement. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It doesn't mean I'm right. It doesn't mean anyone's. But in this sense, I'm looking at it and I'm understanding why it is done and how it is done and why it needs to happen the way it does. Because these things are actually for your benefit. It's not sitting here of like pomp and circumstance of make sure that everyone sees it and then you know that you did it. You do your 10 Hail Marys and 5 Our Fathers and stuff like that and you're absolved. It doesn't actually work like that. But the thing is that you're given religious counsel on how you change those behaviors from people who are trained to do so, rather than holding your sin as if it's like a badge of pride and realizing that you're bleeding out of your hands because you're grasping it so tight because you can't let it go. Or even if you say you let it go, you really didn't. You say, I give this up to you, God. Take this sin away from me. I will make myself better for this, and you will make me better for this. And you realize that you're still clutching onto it, and you never really let it go. So I understand now that the traditions and practices are incredibly important for that. This entire tradition and ritual of this, I'm going to define it as ritual. Even would you consider it ritual?
Oh, absolutely,
okay.
Yeah.
This ritual of it is actually quite important because it solidifies in the body and the mind that this has been done, this has been forgiven. You don't clutch onto it anymore. And when the body and mind are in alignment on that, the spirit follows with it. All three of them intertwine with each other on this, especially around the issue of sin, because sin affects the body, the mind, and the spirit. This ritual that I kind of poo-pooed and like said, oh, they're just doing their weird thing, it actually does have a very important purpose that I had just imagined this entire time was pageantry. It's not.
It's nice to hear that somebody has benefited from the show and that it has wiped away some of those clouds that separated knowledge from this bigotry that you were talking about. We're coming to the end of our time here, but I got to ask, when are we going to get you into the OCIA program?
Oh, goodness gracious. We'll look into that. I'm not committing right now, but I'm not committing either.
Fair enough. Well, I am just thrilled that you came down for the veneration, and I look forward to seeing you at the Mass. I think that you're really going to enjoy yourself, and I hope it's spiritually fulfilling for you.
Well, thank you, Cantor, very much. I am very excited to experience it myself, and I'm so happy that you had me on the podcast today.
Well, I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for being with us today as we walk as pilgrims this road together. If you feel called to learn more, please consider checking out St. Francis Xavier or your local Catholic church. All are welcome into our community as God loves us all equally. If you are interested in supporting the VOXSFX podcast, please visit sfxmissoula.org/donate. Until next time, go forth in peace and be the light of Christ in someone's day.
By Jove, we've got it.